Happy Anthemversary, everybody! February 22nd, 2025 marks 6 years after the release of a true tragedy in AAA gaming. In today's video, I revisit the world of Anthem to answer the questions of, does anybody still log on to this game? When will the servers shut down? Will it ever get a sequel? Why am I even here? Hello? No, the video's starting now. What the fuck? Anthem is one of the few video games that I really thought had monumental potential. I got the chance to playtest this game before release, and let me tell you, it immediately became my favorite movement system ever made for a video game aside from Titanfall 2. BioWare and EA had a small team of developers working to push out a 2.0 update, which would have acted as a major overhaul to address many issues with the game. This makes me feel like even more of a fool for believing in BioWare since it got scrapped in the middle of development. And let me tell you, 6 years later, it still fucking hurts. The E3 trailer for Anthem looked amazing and promised amazing things. Unfortunately, as seen in Jason Schreier's article about Anthem's development, the E3 trailer was mostly fabricated. Much of the tech, environments, and creatures shown were fake and had to be referenced when developing the actual content for the game later on. They had to deliver a fully functional game based on a facade while under strict deadlines. While this all could have been a problem of BioWare's own making, and while my wallet still hurts from paying full price for this game, I do feel sympathy for the employees who deserve more time and way better treatment. I'll link all of the articles in the description below if you'd like to read more. With all of that background info out of the way, let's see how my sessions playing Anthem in 2025 actually went. I went live on Twitch so that I could expose myself to the threat of human interaction in case I was truly the only Anthem player left alive on planet Earth. That first live stream was a disaster. My game launched in 2K 144Hz with DLSS and ultra graphics enabled, and my computer almost exploded. I fixed everything and went live again, ready to explore the town. The entire hub world is quite pretty to look at, with winding alleys, dead ends that give a glimpse into beautiful architecture and environmental storytelling, and a market area that ends up being somewhat lackluster when compared to what was promised at E3 all of those years ago. And I gotta say, it's pretty, but it could have been so much more. Look at this stationary machine that hangs over the market. In the trailer, it was actually moving and dynamic, and it promised like something really cool for the hub world that would add character to the environment. I got reacquainted with the game and hopped into my Javelin, ready to begin a session of free mode and answer the question of if Anthem still has any active players. I selected normal difficulty and launched into a session of free play. The game plays a super cool suit-up sequence of the class you're playing, in my case the Interceptor, and once the loading screen ends, we superhero land into the vast world of the planet Coda. At a first glance, there didn't seem to be any players in my session, so I took flight in search of world events. I first came across a time trial, which was a perfect way to get myself reacquainted with the flight controls and the different parts of the world. The game kept screaming at me to take detours and save lives, but I said no, we're getting this trial to gold. Of course, I failed, but that didn't matter because I then noticed something new. A player had joined my session. I took flight. I propelled past cliffs, over water and wildlife. I was eager to share the space of this lonely world with another adventurer. When I finally arrived at DWeeman 689's position, I came to a devastating realization. They were away from keyboard. I waved. I greeted. Hello there. But to no avail. Suddenly movement. Surely now they would recognize our shared solitude on this lonely ruin. Nope. Upon seeing me, they immediately left the session, never to return. But it was the sign I needed. I knew I'd eventually find more players. And eventually I spotted a username and headed for it. I landed next to Eyeball and did my signature greeting, which was very human and social. They waved back. I knew Eyeball was different, special. Their armor was glossy, their gear and abilities were dazzling. Had I found myself a veteran player? Eager to learn more, I followed Eyeball's every movement through the world. They took me under their wing and took me to many locations I'd never visited. We came upon a massive fortress, given one objective: to destroy the enemy stockpiles. This was a lot of fun. Clearing a fortress in co-op, coordinating our efforts to destroy the enemies, this is how Anthem was meant to be played. I watched as Eyeball vaporized enemy after enemy with blasts of what seemed to be magic projectiles, obliterating even the most elite of enemies. We collected our loot, reveling in the aftermath, and headed on to the next location. Eyeball took us on what I assumed to be a resource run. We collected plants and minerals along a path, discovering hidden chests of common and rare loot, reaching points of interest where the developers hid lore and small collectibles to increase faction standing. My favorite part of our exploration was when we approached this tube. It was a connection between different regions of the map, allowing for us to kind of sit and relax and appreciate the journey that we were on. It eventually spat us out on the other side to unfamiliar architecture. We performed the typical loot gathering and enemy slaying that persists in Anthem's gameplay loop until we reached a solitary statue at the map's edge. I wish I had the in-game volume recorded from the Twitch VOD because this was a great moment. Oh, interesting. Bro, that is literally so fucking Warhammer coded. What the hell? Next, we entered a dungeon, responding to the distress call of an arcanist. We followed the dungeon's linear path into the depths of a cave, clearing out any enemies that got in our way. Just as with the open world, there were secrets to discover inside of the dungeon. Near the end, we fought a large beast. We got slightly lost on what to do for the final objective, and I accidentally exited the dungeon entirely. Huh? Was I supposed to do that? There's no way. Forced to re-enter and once again meet up with my new friend. We cleared out more enemies, destroyed the Dominion's supply cache, and we celebrated. As you can probably guess by now, this gameplay loop persisted for another 30 minutes or so until I reached the free play loot cap. What? This to me is lame as hell. Like, this isn't Genshin Impact. Let me pick up more rocks and green orbs. This was our sign to part ways. Eyeball had shown me so much of the game's world and even brought me to the impassable doors of a dungeon that encouraged me to keep playing so I could one day gain access and maybe fight through more content. I knew what I needed to grind for. I let them know that it was time for me to leave, and we said our goodbyes. It had been a fun session, and it was time for me to see what rewards I had gained. The game tallied up all of my experience earned for my character. I then looked over all of the loot I had obtained. Back in the player hub, I entered the forge and kitted out my javelin with some much needed upgrades and new abilities. This moment was when the course of my day changed once again. A viewer by the name of NYCUAE followed the channel. They said they were new to the game and asked if they could join in on a free play session. So I said, hey, why not? I wanted to play with my new abilities anyways and see how much cooler my character looked now that I'd invested into some cosmetics. I invited NYC through EA Play and we began another session. I took the lead and NYC followed. We saved some people caught inside of a crashed Strider. We found a group of enemies to fight and I got the chance to try out my new abilities. A swift dash with explosive damage potential and a deadly ghost projection that targets up to 3 enemies. It felt like everything was coming together. We demolished wave after wave of enemies. 2 other players joined us in our onslaught. We killed more waves and more waves and more waves. Okay, I think this entire event was bugged out because the flood of enemies would not stop. Me and NYC agreed to bail out, and I took NYC on the same scenic route that Eyeball had taken me on earlier. We stopped by the statue and got to appreciate it in different lighting. We found a smorgasbord of lore documents at a random encampment and entered the dungeon I'd gone through an hour prior. This time though, the enemies inside were different and there was no real objective to accomplish, no arcanists to save. I'm gonna put up a random compilation of combat clips on screen now because there were a lot of fun moments using my interceptor abilities that really highlight just how fun this game's combat can get if you find the right playstyle. For instance, I entered free play today, this time on hard difficulty, and found my way into this really cool cave dungeon with a ton of elite enemies. I was underleveled, but the interceptor class shines at being a nimble glass cannon. I picked off small enemies to charge up my ultimate ability, and when the final boss spawned, I used my ultimate to clear out the boss and all the floating shielded mage minions that I kind of left for last. The cave itself was super linear, but it was a lot of fun to pick through as a first time experience because the environmental design was beautiful. I found another cool location near the edge of the map, kind of similar to the statue that we found earlier, because it had another cinematic attached to the lore item, and I really enjoyed the ambience of the moment. Anthem, while it's a phantasmic imprint of what could have been a phenomenal looter shooter, still has enough active players that you can frequently find full 4-player lobbies. If you check the seasonal leaderboards, you can see at least 300 players have participated in the last cycle of Echoes of Reality, which I assume are a set of challenges and missions. I'm also assuming that the 299 players listed on the 55 pages are just the people with the highest scores, and that there's also a lot more players with less scores, including new or returning players like me. With those seasonal challenges, there's also a seasonal shop to spend your currency in the player hub on items like new cosmetics or upgrades, providing a little extra grind for, which is something I appreciate since the game obviously gets no updates. Anthem nurtures a small but existent player base, and I don't see EA or bioware shutting down the servers anytime soon, considering they still hold online support for many of their other titles. Now, how about a sequel? BioWare has made no indication of ever releasing a second Anthem game. Well, it could be possible in the far future, since the old old creative team has largely moved on to new projects or new companies altogether, it would require a lot of resources and a new vision to accomplish a sequel. I hope I'm dead wrong about this because I'd love nothing more than a 2.0 version of Anthem that we deserve to get, but I'm trying to hold realistic expectations. I hope you enjoyed watching the video and didn't get too irritated by my ever-changing editing style. If you're interested, pick up Anthem on sale if it's ever severely discounted, especially if you play with a friend. I'm sure you could have some fun here like I did. I wanted to say thank you to Eyeball and NYC for making my sessions a lot more fun than they could have been if I were playing alone. Thanks for watching.